So this brings us back to what is meant by sin. Why does love the sin or hate the sin not cut it for gay or trans people? Because it does not, theologically, psychologically, biologically, philosophically, practically, or morally. Because sin is a choice. I think I've demonstrated thoroughly that being gay is not a choice. And in fact, all the passages condemning gay male acts simultaneously assert the theory that these acts aren't natural. These authors are mistaken. What is a choice is fixing your heart against a certain group of people above, one, everything we know about the natural world, two, all other vices and lists from an ancient tradition figuring itself out, and three, crucially, above what the central figure in your religion says are the most important commandments in your faith. By not accepting gay and trans people, you are not loving God because you are not accepting his creation. And by marginalizing them or the relationships, you are not loving your neighbor as yourself. Time after time, in the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, from the lesson of the goats and the sheep to those he ate with and is portrayed as healing, Jesus taught not to marginalize people. He taught to treat those at the margins of society as if they were Jesus himself. So consider this. If a gay Jesus came into your church with his partner, John, the disciple that Jesus loved, as a Christian who accepts the nature of God's creation, you should accept and make them feel welcome, right? I mean, even if you think Paul is a prophet, you know he wasn't fully aware of healthy adult same-sex relationships or that it was natural, but you are. And again, Jesus did say that all the law and all the prophets hang on those two precepts. Love God completely and love your neighbor as yourself. So by not accepting Jesus and John into your church or even being judgmental of their relationship, you are doing neither of the two key commandments of the central figure in your faith tradition. Worse, you are sinning by fixing your heart against them. Still, many Christians and churches do exactly that. You saw the memes earlier, which are essentially advocating for a come closeted or don't come policy. I've also seen an acknowledgement from many of them that people were born gay or trans, but should nonetheless deny their identity, become celibate, or even marry a person that they're not attracted to or that won't accept their identity. Beyond the moral and logical contradictions of God creating a person the wrong way, these do not tend to have healthy outcomes. Gay conversion therapy and attempts to change one's sexual orientation has long been rejected by every major medical, psychiatric, and counseling organization as ineffective, with higher documented rates of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and suicidality. Sorry, I started saying it that way for the Epstein app, and I still don't know if the real word is actually allowed on here, so that's how I'm saying it for now. Nonetheless, I've heard disturbing, if poetic, self-hating terms to defend this bigotry, even from supposed gay Christians, like, as I said, love the sinner, hate the sin. We're all born in sin. That's why we need Jesus. Okay, if Jesus died for this sin, why can't two men get married already? Also, the doctrine of original sin was formulated as late as the 4th century with Augustine, who again held a commitment to the concept of biblical inerrancy. Get out of here with that. Then there's, sure, you're born gay, you need to be born again in Jesus, and even people saying you need to crucify the flesh. All very gross appropriation of the Gospel of John and Paul, taken out of context to target one group of people. Again, in clear violation of Jesus's greatest commandment and second greatest commandment. And frankly, this goes far beyond not loving your neighbor as yourself. It's trying to convince your neighbor to hate themselves and how God made them. So why are so many Christians activated specifically around this subject now, but not slavery in the Bible, not adherence to dietary law, protections for the Sabbath, mixing fabrics, capitalism, and greed in the church, usury? They don't even say much about the other stuff on Paul's vice lists. The answer is that most of the modern world has already decided on those matters, mostly against strict biblical teaching, hundreds of years ago. And to be fair, with Christians on both sides of most of these arguments. Hegel's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis have strong roots in his observations of the history of Jewish discourse in Christendom. He was a Lutheran, after all. Honestly, it's a shame with how much Christianity has helped shape the modern world, how many Christians choose to turn their back on it. I'm also convinced that far from piety or obedience, the selective existential dread that Christians have, particularly around this subject, is from the knowledge of where this is going. If they accept openly gay or trans parishioners, they'll eventually have to treat them like equal humans under God. It'd only be a matter of time before they'll have to accept some of them into their clergy. Openly, I mean. There are plenty of gay people and plenty of clergies. Then there's only a matter of time before their churches will have to marry them. And that's why they're fixated. If only they could see that keeping openly queer people out of their communities is the biggest sin of all, because that's essentially seeking to cut these people off from connecting with God within a community, because otherwise a tradition that they like, which has evolved countless times, will evolve once again in a way that will make them uncomfortable. And they're so blinded by this selfishness that they'll deny reality and try to make people choose between rejecting God or rejecting how God made them. And I haven't even mentioned people born intersex with several sex characteristics. They're about 2% of the population, the same as redheads, but presumably still made in God's image. Could you imagine if a church wouldn't accept redheads unless they dyed their hair forever? So what do we do about all this? Well, I think we all know LGBTQI folks who have been raised in the tradition and had it robbed of them by a bigoted atmosphere. And if that experience left a bad taste in your mouth, I'm sure it did. But to the point that none of this speaks to you, I get it. There's nothing wrong with separating from Christianity completely as long as it's like this. There is some good news on that front, though. Some mainline churches are becoming affirming, performing same-sex weddings, etc., and denominations such as the United Church of Christ, the Episcopal Church, and the Presbyterian Church include explicitly inclusive language requiring their churches to offer weddings with a different pastor or priest if necessary. So here's hoping that catches on and more churches change one day, enough to welcome you back. But if that's not your calling, then that's not your job. But also, if you like any of my arguments here or rhetorical frameworks and wish to reclaim your birthright or pursue some sort of salvation for yourself, Christianity, or humankind, if you feel like I do, a righteous indignation about all the distortions I've laid out, maybe you should just go back to church. Any church. I mean, if we're in the right here, we could eventually change every church sooner or later. Don't we, in fact, have a godly duty to fight for our gay and trans brothers and sisters to be recognized? Isn't this a spiritual holy war we have on our hands? So, yeah, go back to your Protestant, Catholic, or Orthodox churches, even mega churches. You know, especially mega churches, and ask the pastor if they believe in biblical inerrancy and why. Ask them if they believe in slavery and polygamy and why not. Ask them if they think God made gay or trans people as part of the natural world, and if so, does he want you to have equal rights? Use any and all of what I've said, develop more of your own arguments or beliefs, and keep pushing these blind, selfish brothers and sisters in Christ to see the light, to adhere their faith to the nature of God's reality and the commandments Jesus said all the rest hang on. Bring your partner. Do-si-do. Demand that your relationships are no lesser than theirs, that you are equal to them in God's eyes, that you should be accepted into the church or into the clergy if you feel called, that your relationships are natural and should have the church's blessing. And then make it clear to them that not doing so is a sin, And to any preacher who refuses to officiate a gay wedding on ideological grounds, as a follower of Jesus, you simply have to love the sinner and hate the sin. And to all those Christians or churches who agree with any of what I've said here, even the mainline churches, for God's sake, stop backing down to these fundamentalist talking nonsense. Lead with this stuff, engage, fight. People out there don't have any community at all. Common spaces have been plundered. Wealth inequality is rampant. AI is taking people's jobs and purpose. And yet, church attendance is way down. It's not because people don't need this message. It's because people need to see that it's a message with moral clarity that you're willing to fight for. Think of Jesus' example. These bigots are overly legalistic Pharisees and money changers. Throw over some tables. Defend your queer brothers and sisters and their rights. Eventually, hopefully, one day, the truth will rise above the hate. Otherwise, I don't imagine I'll have a church to come back to, and my Christianity will remain relegated to saying the Lord's Prayer in private, just like Jesus instructed. But anyway, what do y'all think? Am I crazy, or is this a real religious zeal I'm feeling here? Is your church on the same mission? Reach out. Maybe I will come. Did I get some details wrong? I must have. Let me know. Or like, subscribe, comment. Even come on the show. Debate me. Rebuke me. Someone I met actually rebuked me in a chat for talking about this stuff. I've never been openly rebuked, but I'm sure a lot of people have thought it before. But above all, thanks so much for listening. And until next time, God bless you.